In this video, I'm going to walk through using PowerShell-based Azure Functions and an app service hybrid connection to run PowerShell commands inside a private network. Hello, my name is Travis and this is Seraltos. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up an Azure function with an app service hybrid connection to run code from an Azure function inside a private network. The example I'm using is to trigger a file download each time a file is added to a storage account. But even if that's not something you could use in your environment, the ability to run PowerShell code from an Azure function inside a private network opens up a lot of automation possibilities. So get some coffee, get comfortable, because this video has a lot to cover. Before I get started, please take a second to subscribe. That lets me know that these videos are watched and appreciated. I did a video recently on using Azure Automation to download files locally when one's added to a storage account using a hybrid worker. I'll add the link above. I mumbled something about not being able to find a way to do it with Azure Functions and PowerShell. Well, to my excitement, Microsoft published a document on how to bridge Azure Functions to the local network using hybrid connections. I'll add a link to that in the video description below. This video revisits my Azure Automation file download example, this time using Azure Functions. Moving on, the process looks like this. A new file is added to a storage account. That triggers an event grid event and starts the Azure function. The Azure function formats the information, and then it uses invoke command to run the script on the computer running the hybrid data connector. The file is then downloaded locally on that server. Let's talk about hybrid connections and app services. The hybrid connection consists of a relay hybrid connection and a hybrid connection manager. The hybrid connection manager runs on a server in the private network and connects to a relay hybrid connection over standard outbound ports, so there's no need to open up holes in the firewall. The function app also connects to the relay hybrid connector. Any DNS calls to the hybrid connection endpoint will get routed over the relay hybrid connection. The relay hybrid connection is a bridge between the function app and the on-premise hybrid connection manager. Under the hood, the relay hybrid connection is using Azure Service Bus Relay. With Azure Automation hybrid workers, the runbook is sent down to the hybrid worker and ran locally. That is not the case with app service hybrid connections. A hybrid connection is, well, just a connection. It consists of a network level endpoint and port redirects. It acts like a network proxy between the function app and the local network. A hybrid connection is limited to TCP port-based traffic. Because it's network-based, it's application independent. This example will use PowerShell remoting with invoke command to run PowerShell on a remote endpoint. There are several steps in this process. I'm going to break this video down into a section for each major activity. I'll even leave a timeline in the description so you can forward to a section if you don't want to start at the beginning. Here are the sections. Create a function app. After that, we'll create a hybrid connection. Once it's created, we'll test the hybrid connection. We'll create an event grid trigger, and then we'll finish the code and test to make sure it works. Here's what you'll need if you want to follow along at home. An Azure subscription, this should go without saying, but you know. A storage account that will be monitored for new files. A server on the network you need to run the commands in, or the on-premises server. You will need admin rights and the AZ PowerShell module installed on that server. With that, let's get started. Buckle up everyone, it's demo time. Here I am at the Azure portal. I already have a storage account and a container set up. I have that over here, and it's in the resource group Hybrid Function App Demo RG. I'm going to keep everything I create in that resource group. That makes cleanup really easy. I'll go back, and the first thing I'm going to do is create the function app. So I'll go to Create Resource, Function App. There it is. So I'll select the function app and create. I'll give it a name. For this, I'll just call it CIR App Service Demo. And that doesn't need to be globally unique. I'll leave it as pay-as-you-go subscription. I'm going to use an existing resource group. I'll leave the OS to Windows. And I have to change it from a consumption-based plan to an app service plan. The reason for that is consumption-based plans can't use the relay hybrid connection. Once I change it to app service plan, it's going to create an app service plan and location for me. One thing I'd like to point out is it's creating an S1 app service plan. I have a couple documents here I'll pull up. Okay, the first one shows the hybrid connections and app service plans. So basically this is just telling me that a basic pricing plan supports up to 5 connections, standard 25, premium and isolated are 200 each. I only need one, and if we go over to the pricing, let's just change that to month. And if we go down to, there's free, basic, and standard. So I can use the basic or the standard or premium or isolated. It's set me up as a S1 by default. That's $73 a month US. If I switch to a B1, because this is a demo, I can go with the smallest plan possible. This is only $54.75 a month. So I'm saving a couple bucks by choosing B1 instead of the default S1. Let's just minimize that. So I'm going to create new, and I'll give it a name, CIR App Service Demo Plan, leave it at Central US, and under pricing tier, I'm going to change this. You can select see recommended or see additional. I actually want to move over to dev test. You can see all of the B plans here, but I'm just going to pick this B1. Apply. Okay. Okay, so now I have my app service plan B1 selected. I'm going to change the runtime stack to PowerShell. That is still preview. Storage account and application insight, I'm just going to leave that as it is and click create. So we'll give that a couple seconds to finish. I'm going to scroll down. I have function apps in my favorites here, so I'm going to click on that and we'll give it a second to show up. There it is. So my app service plan is there, and if we can click on it, that's it for the first step of creating the function app. Let's move on to the next step, which is creating the hybrid connection. I have a server that I set up on premises called Hybrid Test. I'm going to use that as the relay connection manager, and that's where the code is going to run on. I have several scripts, and the first one I'm going to show you is actually comes straight from a document I've referenced here. So I'll post this on my GitHub. Actually, all of this will be on my GitHub page, but this one, there's a reference to a document. This is the document that I actually use as a basis for this entire video. Some modifications along the way. This first script, all it does is configures PowerShell remoting for the server. So there's a couple steps it goes through. It enables PS remoting, sets the firewall rule for remoting, and then it creates a self-signed certificate using the computer name and grabs the thumbprint, and then it creates the WinRM HTTPS listener. There are a lot of good resources online about PowerShell remoting. I'm not one of them. So if you need more information, I know this link has a link to another document that goes into detail on PowerShell remoting. So you can check that out. But for now, all I'm going to do is copy this code. I'm going to hop over to the server. Here I am on the server. I'm going to paste that in, select it all, and I'll run it. And this will configure this server for PowerShell remoting. This too just takes a couple seconds to run. Okay, it's done. So I can minimize this, and I'll go back to the portal. Here I am at the function app. Next, I'm going to create the relay connection. I do that by going into Platform Features, Networking, and Configure your hybrid connection endpoint. If you don't see this option, there's a good chance you selected the consumption-based plan and not the app service plan. I'm going to go into Configure your hybrid connection endpoint and add hybrid connection and create a hybrid connection. The name will be the name of the server, and the endpoint host will also be the name of the server. The endpoint host has to be DNS resolvable on the server running the connection manager. The host and the connection manager in this case are running on the same computer, so that won't be a problem. Endpoint port is 5986. That's the default WinRM HTTPS port. I'll create a new service bus namespace, leave it in the location of Central US, and give it a name. PowerShell Hybrid Function Test. Once that's all set, click OK. I'll give it a second to finish. The hybrid connection is finished, and here you can see the name, the status, it's not connected, the endpoint, so that's a name and port number, and then the namespace. I'm going back to the hybrid test server, the one running on premises. I'm going to log into that function app and go into Platform Features. Let's see, Networking, because I need to download the connection manager. So I'll go into the configuration. Once I get in there, there's a download connection manager option. So I'll click that and I'll select Run. This is a pretty straightforward install. I'll just accept and install and finish. Now I'm going to go into the connection manager, and that will be available under recently added. Here I am in the hybrid connection manager. I'm going to add a new hybrid connection. This is going to ask me to sign in to my Azure account. I'm signed in. I'm going to choose a subscription, pay as you go. Now all of my hybrid connections are listed here. I only have one, so I'll select that one and save. Now it's showing up, but it's showing as not connected. So if I go back into PowerShell, and just so you know, I ran this instance of PowerShell as the local admin. I'll issue the command restart service hybrid connection manager. Now if I come back to the hybrid connection manager window, refresh, I'm connected. Perfect. If I come back to the main portal, and we'll do a refresh here as well, and that's showing as connected. At this point, my function app has a connection through the hybrid relay connector to the server on my network. That's it for setting up the connection. Now let's test it. To test it, I'm going to come back to my function app and create a new function. I'm going to create this in portal. I'll click continue, and I'm not going to do a webhook or a timer, so I need more templates, and I'll finish and view templates. This is going to trigger by event grid, so I'll select event grid. Here's Azure Event Grid Trigger. Next, it'll ask to install an extension. I'm going to click install, and this should just take a minute or so. That finish, I'll click continue. I'll change the name to hybrid demo and create. This is the function app, and if I go here, we can see we've got logs. So it's a real-time logging you can view. We also have the console if you need console access to the function app. Over here, there's the option to view files. Run.ps1 is the actual code that will run. Function.json is control information about the function. So in this case, one of the things we'll note here is the bindings. Event grid event is the binding, and that maps to this input parameter of event grid events. So I'm just going to hide that. I have some code that I'm going to enter here in a second that will test the hybrid connection. But before that, I need to enter the password for the user that's going to use to invoke the command. Let's go back into my function app and configuration. I'm going to add a new application setting. This is an application setting that I can call during runtime that's available within this function app. I'm going to call it admin password, and the password or the value will be fake password 321. So this is going to be the administrator password that's used for the connection. So if I click OK and then save is important. Now we have an admin password application setting. We can view the setting there if we want to. And that's going to be the password because I don't want to keep that password in the code. This makes it available during runtime. Plus, if I ever change this and I have multiple functions calling on that application setting, I only have to update it in one spot. I'm going to go back to the application, back into hybrid demo, and I'm going to paste the code in. This is code I'm using to test endpoint connectivity. So this has nothing to do with my final script. This is just testing to make sure that I can run a command on that hybrid endpoint. I'll go over a few things. First, we have the parameter. I'm not even using that at this point, so nothing's calling that within the script. I have some write output statements. This is just going to get the app service host name. So we can see the local service host name just by pulling the environmental variable and computer name. Here I have my hybrid endpoint. This is the name of the server, and that maps to the hybrid connection we just set up. I have a username of administrator, and I have the app password, environmental variable admin password. Here I'm creating a secured password, and then I'm pulling that into a credential object. So this is just setting up the authentication for the invoke command. I have a script block, pretty simple. I'm running the same command. I'm getting the computer name, and then I'm doing the invoke command, which is going to connect to that hybrid endpoint, use the credentials, the port, and then run the script. And if this runs successfully, we should see the output from the computer name in the app function, And then we should see that hybrid test. So let's save that, put logs up here, and then run. And I can expand this as well. So here, app service hostname is showing as RD00, and then remote endpoint hostname is hybrid test. So that's a success. I've shown what the local app service hostname is. Then I was able to use the invoke command to get the hostname of the remote server. Keep in mind that this is only a test. The only purpose is to validate the connection. Although some of the code used for that connection, we will use again in the final script. Let's move on to event triggers. I created this as an event grid trigger, but I didn't actually set up the event grid trigger. So to do that, click here to add event grid subscription. I'll give it a name of new blob event. I'll leave the schema as event grid schema. Under topic, I'm going to select storage account. It'll ask for a subscription. I'll select my subscription. Resource group is the resource group that I'm using. And the resource is this CIR hybrid function demo. That's the storage account that I'm going to monitor. Types of events to filter. It has blob created and blob deleted. I'm going to uncheck the blob deleted. I only want this to run when one's created. And it creates the webhook automatically. I don't have to add that in. Next, I'll click create. And that will set up the trigger. Let's move on to testing this. I have another block of code that I'm going to enter in here and update this. This time it's using the parameter of event grid event, and I'm going to do some outputs. I'm going to write the output of the event grid event as a string. The next one is I'm going to run the command get member on it. So we're going to find out what type of data is getting passed into the function app. And then finally, we're going to convert that to JSON. I'm going to copy that JSON out and paste it into a JSON file so we can examine the data and try to pull some variables out of it. So I'll click save. The easiest way to test it is to upload a file and see what comes through. Go into my storage account. I'll open up Storage Explorer. This is just a quick way to upload a file into a container. So I'll select my container here and upload. There's a test file. I'll select open and upload. Now if I go back here and open up logs, so we got some data. Here you can see at the top we have the webhook data, and that's outputting all the data that is in the webhook. After that I have the get member statement, and the get member is a hash table, so that's good. So that means I can run any commands that are available for hash tables against this data. And I'm going to scroll down. There you can see the JSON data, and I'm going to copy that data in right from the curly bracket right after output to the very last curly bracket. I'm going to open up VS Code, and I have a temp.json file here. I'm just going to paste that in. This is all the data passed in from event trigger. There's a few items I need out of this for my final script to run correctly. I'm going to go into variables. Here's a list of all the variables I need for my function app. First is local file path. This is a static entry that indicates where the files are going to be downloaded to. Next is storage account name. I'm going to pull the storage account name from eventgrid.topic, and let's go and look at that. So we go here, eventgrid.topic, and here you can see my subscription ID, resource group, provider, storage account. So it's the last item here. It's item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's the 8th item. So let's go back into variables, and in order to get that, I'm going to take eventgrid.topic and split that on the /, and then I'm going to pull out the 8th item in that array and assign that to the storage account name. So that's going to give me the storage account name. Next is container, and I have a note here, eventgrid event.subject. I guess that's an error on my part. Subject, there we go. So let's look at eventgrid event.subject. Here we are back in that JSON data and .subject. We're trying to find the container name. So containers, here's the container name. It's a 4th item in that string. So back under variables, the code I'll use to find that is subject equals eventgrid event.subject, split on the / again, and select the 4th item. The last thing I need is the file name. And it looks like that's in event-grid-event.data.url. There it is. And yep, it's right at the end. Let's go back to the list of variables. Here's the code I'll use to find that. I'm going to take event-grid-event and I'm going to replace the string HTTPS storage account name, blobcorewindows.net, and the container, and I'm going to replace that with nothing. So if I come back, if I take all this away, replace it with nothing, that leaves me the file name. At this point, I can pull all the variables I need from the input data. I'm now ready for the final code. Here I am at the function app, and I updated the code with the final version. So here you can see I have parameters. I'm getting the event grid event and then the trigger metadata. I don't actually use the trigger metadata, but that is available. You could pull it out the same way I did, do the write output and view what that is and see if it's needed for any of your projects. We got the hybrid endpoint. We covered that in the hybrid test, local file path. Here's the connection information for the invoke command. I have some error control information added in. Here's the code used to get the storage account name. Here's the code used to get the container name. We already went over that. Here's the code to get the file name. And here's the script block. This is the script that will be passed by the invoke command to run on the remote machine. There's one thing in here that I don't have. I got local file path, storage account name, storage account key. I didn't do that yet. So let's go back into the function app in configuration. I'm going to create a new application setting. I'll give it the name of CIR hybrid function demo key. Now I need the storage account key so I can access this account from the remote computer. So I'm just going to copy the first key to the clipboard. I'll go back here and I'll paste it in. I'm not using deployment slots, so I'll click OK. And very important, save. And again, I added the storage account key as an environmental variable that I can call during runtime. If I have multiple functions, I can call that key, so I only need to have it in one spot. If I need to update the key, I only have to update it in one spot, and I'm not putting a security item in code. Let's go back to my demo. Let's see, where were we at? The script. So this is the script block. Here I'm testing if the path exists on the local machine. If it doesn't, it'll create it. Next, I'm creating a storage account context. Finally, I'm using the get az storage blob container to download the file. I think I said this earlier, but I'll say it again. You do need to install the AZ module on the remote endpoint. At the very end, I'm running the invoke command. I'm passing the credentials. I'm specifying the port. This looks similar to the test we did, only we've got a script block. It's a little bit more advanced, and I'm passing arguments into it. Here you can see the environmental CIR hybrid function demo key. That's getting passed in as storage account key. And that should do it. I'm going to click save. Let's open up logs and let's upload a file to see what happens. Here I'm back in the storage container. I'm just using Storage Explorer through the web. I'm going to upload that file again. And I'll check this box that allows overwrites and upload. Let's hop back here. It's running, and it looks like it's done. Now let's go onto the server. If I open up File Explorer, go to my computer, the C drive, there's a blob directory, and there it is. So that's a success. Let's try one more thing. I'm going to create a new folder. I'll call it test folder. Click OK, and I'll upload that file to that folder. Now if I go back to the function app demo, we can see, yep, test folder, hybrid test demo. Let's see if it's there. There's a test folder and hybrid demo test. So that's a success, and that's it for my demo. That is it. Although this video uses the specific example of downloading files, I hope you can see the value in running Azure Function-based PowerShell commands inside a private network. I hope you found this useful. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications of new content. Thanks for watching.